And Formula One in 2023 is go!
We start in Bahrain, and after qualifying in first, Verstappen did the deed in the opening race and won. But behind him, the action was pretty good. Stroll with his broken wrist slapped his teammate at turn 4 and somehow didn't retire him. Alonso raced hard with both Mercedes and Sainz to get on the podium in his first race with Aston Martin, and he also overtook at this tight turn. I've never seen anyone do that in F1. Elsewhere, Ferrari threw away an easy podium with Leclerc, and Bottas also managed an 8th place with Albon grabbing 10th and Gasly going from last on the grid to 9th at the flag. This is a very exciting one, as Alonso's comeback after getting hit by Stroll to come back to the P3 he deserved so much was pretty good. Couple this with the battles behind for the last few points, and this was a pretty good one and a race we've come to expect from Bahrain. I'll put it in A.
And the Saudi Grand Prix is go!
The order was shaken up slightly in Jeddah as Verstappen had issues and was knocked out in Q2. The top 3 was a tasty one though, as Perez got pole from Leclerc and Alonso. By starting second, thanks to the penalty Leclerc had to take for the failure in Bahrain, Alonso got the inside line from Perez and took the lead. Stroll was also on fire as he got past Sainz with a brilliant move around the spoon curve wannabe. However, Fernando was in the incorrect starting location and so got a 5-second penalty. Stroll suffered a failure though and was forced to retire, and this caused a safety car. The race for the final points positions was good though, as Tsunoda fought hard with Magnussen for 10th place. Perez went on to win and held off Verstappen to pretty much tie them on points in the standings. This one was also pretty exciting, with Jeddah delivering again. Fights for the big points and the small ones, as well as a good comeback drive from Verstappen, ensures this is a high B.
And the Australian Grand Prix is go!
Into turn 1, Russell sent it down the inside before Leclerc tried to turn into Stroll and ended up in the gravel. Then on lap 7, Albon binned it and caused a red flag. Russell had a big failure on lap 18, Perez clawed his way back up the field, and there were quite a few good moves being completed. But finally, on lap 53, Magnussen clipped the wall on the exit of turn 2, which ended up being a red flag. So on our third restart, all hell broke loose. Sainz clipped Alonso, 2 cars didn't make the first corner, and the bald eagle just forgot to brake or something. Then France declared war on themselves, and Stroll outbraked himself and went into the gravel. After this mayhem, it was Verstappen, Hamilton, Sainz, Hülkenberg, Tsunoda, the 2 McLarens, and the 2 Alphas. Then, I don't know why they did this, but they finished behind the safety car with Alonso going back to 3rd, Stroll to 5th, and Tsunoda back out of the points to 11th. In the end, 12 drivers finished, and although this was chaotic, the middle part of the race was pretty boring. Purely because of that restart, it's an A, but a low A.
And Formula One is underway on the streets of Baku.
Baku is a very hit or miss track. Hit and it's the best race of the season, but miss and it's one of the most boring. Leclerc started on pole for the sprint, and Russell did his thing and went for a stupid move which damaged Verstappen's car. On lap 7 though, after leading up to this point, Leclerc lost the lead to Perez, which would be a thing Charles would come to accept as the season went on. This was a solid race, and yes, these are races. I'll put it in C. For the race, Leclerc started on pole and stayed ahead for a grand total of 3 laps. Then De Vries, remember him, binned it at this turn and caused a safety car. But Verstappen came in a lap before the safety car actually came out, and so Perez, who hadn't pitted, got a free pit stop. But there wasn't too much to this race. Perez pumped in good laps, Max couldn't keep up, and we definitely had a title fight on. It's an E tier only because of Perez's superb drive, but let's flick over to the pit. What the fuck?
And for Formula One in Miami, it's race on!
What great timing for this track to pop up. Right after the bore of Baku, this awful track is there to make us fall asleep once again. Anyway, into this race, and nothing happened at turn 1, but Max did pull a nice move to get past 2 cars into 6th place. Yeah, Verstappen did have to overtake cars, but they were all DRS passes down the back straight, and no photographers got ran over on the final lap, so I'm putting this race in F. Ah yes, Imola. Yeah, it didn't happen. Yuki became a helper for the weekend and the entire paddock was flooded. I'll put this race in its own special tier of things that didn't happen though.
And Formula One is racing on the streets of Monte Carlo.
Damn, they must be putting all these boring races next to each other deliberately. Well, this one had something, but we'll get to that something, as qualifying is more important here, so let's start with that. While fighting for the title, Perez tried to be the hero in Q1, which led to him binning it at Sandoval and everyone being able to see the Red Bull floor. But for once in Q3, pole wasn't decided by whoever was in the barrier at the swimming pool section. After the first runs, Ocon was on provisional pole, but in the final runs, Leclerc, Alonso and Verstappen all had a chance. Leclerc was first across the line before Sainz missed out by 1.5 tenths. Next was Alonso, who was absolutely flying with 2 purple sectors, and he clinched the pole by 22 milliseconds. But last was the unstoppable force, Verstappen. By the end of sector 2 he was 2/10 down, so he just swung the car around every corner with maximum risk and ended up with a purple final sector and a 900th gap to second. At the race start, Ocon overtook Leclerc and Verstappen held the lead, but on lap 53 something happened. With Alonso 12 seconds behind Verstappen, if they nailed the strategy, they could potentially jump him when Max would eventually have to stop for inters. But no, they went for mediums instead of inters, and this left Verstappen with a free pit stop as the rain really came down on the next lap. This overall mare race was transformed by the weather as chaos ensued. Ocon picked up a podium and Ferrari completely bottled it. It was going to be a typical Monaco Grand Prix if the rain didn't come down, but because it did, I'll put it in D.
For the Spanish Grand Prix.
After last year's banger at Spain, I had some expectations for this race, and with the reintroduction of the flat final corner, it was surely going to be better. Norris got impatient at turn 2 and ruined his race in the first few corners, and Stroll sent it into P3 at turn 5. There were some good battles down the order in this one, but like the last few races, it's just been a bit meh. Other than that, it was pretty boring with nothing much else to say as all 20 drivers finished. This is a D tier race.
And the Canadian Grand Prix is go!
And finally we return to a great track, the home of Lance Stroll and Go Tiffy, the Gilles Villeneuve circuit. Off the start, Hamilton jumped Alonso and no one crashed into each other on lap 1. But on lap 12, the barrier crashed into Russell and completely ruined his car. Then De Vries wanted some screen time, so he crashed into Magnussen and then locked up in front of Magnussen. Another man on a mission was Albon, who had been quietly doing the business for Williams while absolutely destroying his teammate. He was 7th and used his ability and the straight line speed of the Williams to defend his 7th place. This race was pretty exciting with the various battles such as Hamilton Alonso, Bottas and Norris, and of course Albon's defence. I'll give Canada a B.
And the Austrian Grand Prix is go!
In the Austria sprint, it was a wet to dry race and meant there was a lot to look at. We start with the Red Bulls almost taking each other out at the start as Perez tried to fight Max. Then Max broke a bit late and Hülkenberg ended up in second. Hulk lasted 12 laps in second before it started to dry up and Perez got his act together. We got some great racing in the wet and then more when the track started to dry. It was a question of if you could stay out for the rest of the race or get a lot more pace by pitting for slicks. It was very entertaining seeing the cars on quicker tyres coming through, but in the end the top 5 won out by staying out as Hülkenberg could only get up to 6th. A very good sprint, made good by the weather, but a great race nonetheless. A tier. On lap 1, nothing really happened. On lap 14, we lost Hülkenberg as he pulled off the track, and for retiring his car, he received a black and white flag for track limits. We got some great racing and DRS moves, but there were a few very good battles, mostly going on in the lower end of the field out of the points. But this weekend was tainted by the constant track limit warnings. The stewards said they had to investigate like 1200 laps for going over the white lines. It was just ridiculous and meant the final result was announced later that day instead of, when the race finishes. Just look at the Wikipedia page where all the post-race penalties are noted. Ocon, obviously it'd be him, got 30 seconds worth of penalties and Sainz lost his 4th place to Norris and Alonso behind him. For this mania, Austria gets a B. Always gives us good racing, but this time we didn't have a fight for the win, so not quite an A.
Away we go, Max Verstappen getting off the line.
Here we go, now a really good track. And we had a great qualifying session with the McLarens being 2 and 3 on the grid. On the run to turn 1, Lando was actually in first with Piastri nearly overtaking Max for second. Norris lasted 5 laps in front. It ended with Verstappen winning, Norris in second and Hamilton in third, with Piastri missing out on the podium he so richly deserved. And finally, the dumbest incident I've ever seen, this by Lance Stroll. This was a pretty decent race. We got a new team at the front and as always, Silverstone gave us some great racing. I'll put it in A. In Hungary, we had the first race without Nick de Vries.
Oh no! Anyway.
There were some shocks on the starting grid though because Zhou was in 5th and Bottas was in 7th. But on lap 1, Zhou stalled, so he then crashed into Ricciardo. But at the front, with Hamilton on pole, he immediately lost the lead to Verstappen, lost 2nd to Norris, and then 3rd to Piastri. After turn 1, there wasn't really much in the way of action, but the Hungaroring once again served up a decent but nothing special Grand Prix, so I'll put it in a high C.
And the Belgian Grand Prix is go!
It was a rolling start and so meant everyone had to be on wets, but the track wasn't wet enough for wets and so everyone pitted but not Verstappen. This meant Piastri in 2nd took the lead of the race and led by 1.5 seconds. Then Alonso binned it in the gravel and Piastri lost his lead. Max overtook him and went on to win. The top 3 was good though, Verstappen, then Piastri, then Gasly, but it was mainly good because of the weather. In this race, Max cruised away from P1 to finish 22 seconds in front of his teammate in P2. There was nothing in this race. I love Spa and it deserves to stay on the calendar, but this was just boring. Spa gets an F.
And we go racing in Zandvoort.
In Zandvoort, we were back on form with the banging qualifyings as, holy shit, that Williams in 4th. At the start, Max held first as Alonso sent it down the inside of turn 3 as he took 3rd. But that's not all, because it was scheduled to rain 1 or 2 minutes into the Grand Prix. Obviously you wouldn't start on the wet, so it would be a 2-minute sprint on the softs until the rain came. After the first lap, 5 drivers pitted and they would go on to win out in the end as the Inters gained so much time as the softs lost it. But it wasn't going to be easy for Max as on lap 62 it all of a sudden became a full wet race. And there was a genuinely amazing gamble by Ocon in 11th for full wets, but was not rewarded because Perez, Tsunoda, Bottas and Zhou couldn't make it past turn 1. But although it finished how it restarted, Perez had come into the pits before the red flag and got a 5-second penalty for speeding. This meant Gasly was promoted to a shock P3 for Alpine. The highlight package on the F1 channel didn't really make this race look the greatest, but it was chaos and it was also really good racing. This track is amazing, this race is getting the first S.
And the Italian Grand Prix is go.
After the bang of the week before, we moved to Monza and Tsunoda's already out of the race. Carlos held on to first into turn 1 and everyone kept it clean. On lap 5, Max had DRS, was 1 second clear of Leclerc behind and would surely overtake Sainz. But he couldn't as Sainz kept composed and positioned his car perfectly every lap. But on lap 15, it came. The first mistake by Sainz and Max pounced on it. But it was good while that lasted, and as Perez got past Sainz on lap 46, the race was over. But it wasn't, because Ferrari let their 2 drivers race on the final laps of the race for the final podium place, and it was incredible, and nearly a national tragedy. This race was very good. Max was challenged for a bit, the Ferrari battle was amazing, Albon held on to another 7th place, and even Bottas got points. And Max didn't win by half a year this time, so it has to be an A.
And the Singapore Grand Prix is go.
After a few weeks to absorb the doubleheader, Singapore was next, and how the f*** is qualifying still so good? Stroll nearly took flight in Q1, but Verstappen was knocked out in Q2 by the new AlphaTauri driver Liam Lawson. Into turn 1, Leclerc got past Russell and Ferrari were 1-2. In the mid part of the race there were big fights going on, big moves being made and Alpine's breaking down. This caused a safety car and put everyone in a dilemma. Their tyres were fine to go to the end and track position was important, so would they stay out or pit for new tyres? Mercedes gambled and boxed both of their drivers for new tyres as the rest stayed out, and this completely transformed the Grand Prix. On lap 58 the top 4 were all within 3 seconds of each other, but this was deliberate. In a 1 million IQ move with a pace disadvantage, Sainz decided to deliberately give Norris behind his DRS so he wouldn't get overtaken by the Mercedes and leave Carlos out to dry. But on the final lap, Russell did a Russell and had a crash. Sainz's plan worked to a T and he did it all by himself in the car while driving around a street circuit. This race was genuinely entertaining throughout. Many battles were going on and the one time Max was nowhere near, we got an incredible 4-way battle for the lead. This is the easiest S you will ever see and I would say race of the season.
And the Japanese Grand Prix is go.
Into turn 1, the drivers at the front kept it clean, kind of, but at the back Williams were flying into the air and the AlphaTauris had an incredible battle. Suzuka didn't really do anything wrong, but it was pretty funny to see Sargent up to his usual business and Perez fighting with a Haas, so I'll put it in C.
And the Qatar Grand Prix is go.
This one was crazy from the start because it was a McLaren 1-2 with Piastri on pole. Oscar had a great start but Lando fell backwards and it was 4 wide going into turn 1. Then Lawson just lost it on his own at the back. From the restart Piastri kept the lead but George's soft tyres were superior and he got past. After seemingly being out with the fight after 3 laps, Piastri was right behind Russell and got past because his mediums hadn't fallen off. Then there was a 3-car crash. But with the championship wrapped up by finishing second, I guess he let Piastri have it because he went on to win his first race. This was a very good race and was a good taster for Sunday. And of course, it's always nice to see a rookie win, even if it wasn't really a race. I'll give this an A. Into turn 1, the Mercedes both got really good starts, but as Hamilton went around the outside, he left Russell no space and so he was hit by his teammate. But since we aren't here to talk about every battle, let's get to the vomiting in helmets, fainting through high speed corners, and retiring because you physically can't go on anymore. Why they hosted this race in October, I will never know. But yeah, this race was entertaining, if not incredibly dangerous, so I'll put it in A.
And the US Grand Prix is go.
This was the most boring thing I've ever watched. I'm almost tempted to put it next to Imola just to imagine that it didn't happen. Into turn 1, Norris took the lead and held it as everyone kept it under control. The only overtakes were DRS moves on the back straight, and even though Norris was leading the race for quite a few laps, Hamilton and Verstappen's close proximity to each other meant they were both fighting for the win. As the race entered its final lap, Hamilton on the better tyres was catching Max, but there just wasn't enough time as Hamilton was just 2 seconds behind. Well, who cares anyway, Hamilton got disqualified with Leclerc also getting DSQ'd. This was a good watch, I'll put it in B.
And the Mexico City Grand Prix is go!
Has this track ever produced a good race? Anyway, there was an AlphaTauri in 4th, a Ferrari front row, and a Mexican who tried to win the race into turn 1. This track is boring, get an E because at least some shenanigans happened.
And we go racing in Sao Paulo!
Norris claimed pole for this one, but it was Verstappen who got ahead into turn 1 and everyone kept their noses clean. But this race wasn't done because there was battles with Hamilton and Perez and Russell, Ricciardo and Sainz, and an insane fight for 11th place. It ended with Max winning from Norris 4 seconds back and Tsunoda finishing in an impressive P6, with Ricciardo just missing out on a point by 0.2 of a second. This sprint was insane, and I'm going to put it in S tier because the racing was incredible. Into turn 1, the Williams and the Haas crashed into each other and they both retired. Then a flying wheel essentially retired Ricciardo, and also Piastri got involved. In this race there was some decent battles, but it was nowhere near as exciting as Saturday, until Perez got close to Alonso. After around 10 laps of fighting, Perez managed to get past at turn 1. But into turn 1, Perez defended thin air and Alonso passed him on the next straight to get a deserved podium and give us something interesting to watch. That saved this race from being in the E tier, but now it goes into the D tier.
And Formula One goes racing on the streets of Las Vegas!
In qualifying, it was another Ferrari 1-2 on pace. Gasly was in 5th, Albon and Sargent was 6th and 7th, Bottas was 8th, and Magnussen was 9th. Into turn 1, there was no grip, and so Verstappen went straight on and got a 5-second penalty for this. Behind him though, Alonso sent it from 3 miles back and spun into turn 1 as Sainz hit Lewis and also spun at the back. Then Norris had a spin at turn 4 and hit the wall. Then there was more drama as Max sent it on Russell, he didn't know he was there, turned in on Verstappen and debris was everywhere. On lap 43, Max was gone, and so we had to live with the battle for second, which would be Perez as he got past Leclerc as he locked up to surely seal the 1-2. But on the last lap, Charles got a run on Perez and overtook him at the end of the straight to claim second place. Behind them, Russell finished 4th on the road but 8th after his penalty, which meant Ocon got 4th and Stroll got 5th after starting from the back of the grid. A truly insane race which definitely deserves a rewatch because you need more context to really appreciate it. Hopefully it can deliver every year because this is the type of track that deserves to stay on the calendar. S tier.
And the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix is go!
This track has been improved so much since 2021, and those changes meant we actually got a pretty decent race. The various battles in the constructors and drivers made it a very good watch and a tense one as well. In this one, Max won his 19th race of the season and also led 1,000 laps. At the end of the race, the championship looked like this. Verstappen from Perez, from Hamilton, and then Alonso and Leclerc in 4th and 5th on 206 points each. Then Norris on 205 and Sainz on 200. And in the constructors, Mercedes clinched second by 3 points and Williams also survived against AlphaTauri, being only 3 points ahead as well. This is a very good race for Abu Dhabi standards, so I'll put it in B. But if you've made it this far, I appreciate it so much and thank you. And make sure to subscribe because I've got big things planned for December.